I'm Denise Matthews. I run the Startup Grind event every month. I also have my own startup called One Median Events, and I am the operations manager of a blockchain innovation center, which is part of the GSX group. So no more about me, I promise. Minister Albert Isola has come in today, especially to give us a warm welcome. So please, could we give him a warm welcome?
Thank you, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, with so many of you here, to welcome this genius, this quite incredible individual who I had the very good fortune to meet 2 years ago in the summer when Joey said, do you mind taking some time to meet Malcolm? First time I met Malcolm also, and Diego, and have dinner together. These guys will give you an idea of the kind of things we can do if we get this DLT legal framework through. And frankly, what I heard over that 2 hours in the summer of 2017 just accelerated all the thinking and all the work that we were doing to enable us to publish in October of 2017 the DLT framework, and as they say, the rest is history. I couldn't lose the opportunity of Diego being here to publicly thank him. And to thank Alejandro, who's sitting on the front row, for their support. They have been running the blockchain course at the University of Gibraltar, and they've just finished yesterday. And it's a funny thing when people come to Gib to set up businesses and work from here, when you ask them, would you mind giving us some support in our university? We think it's far more than business. We want to educate, we want people to be better informed, we want to promote research and more knowledge in terms of the blockchain space and its opportunities. And Diego's commitment, he has seen through in the hands and mouth of Alejandro, who's been coming to take these courses for us. And I'm hugely grateful to you, Alejandro, and to you, Diego, for having done it. Diego is an individual who many of you probably know much more about than I do. I've just had the good fortune to know him and consider him a friend. And to have him with us, the knowledge and the expertise that Diego and his team have through RSK and RIF in terms of the infrastructure of what blockchain can do is hugely important for us. And it's a credit to Joey and the work that you've done in working with Diego to bring him here to the jurisdiction, and to all of you that interact with us to bring people of this caliber and quality to our jurisdiction. So I just want to say thank you, Diego. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here with us. It's always fun to see you and to learn about the incredible things that you're working on. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in the future. And Diego and Joey, it's going to be a spectacular 30 or 40 minutes. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I'll kick things off. Lots of difficult questions coming through, but I mean, I've heard you talk many times, and I think you've given some examples sort of back in, I think it was 1995, you started working with bringing one of the original or biggest newspapers back in Argentina online, and you always talk of the internet as an example being sort of technology that transforms society. This new wonderful technology is emerging. People talk about it having different purposes, uses, applications, etc., etc. You use the term an internet of value. You use it a lot, and RIF Labs follow it. I just want you to talk about the concept of why you use the term an internet of value and what that means.
Yes. Well, I think all disruptive technologies are very difficult to grasp at the beginning. So I came out with this concept of the Internet of Value, which was used around the same time by other projects, but in a different way. In my vision, when we started talking about the Internet of Value, what we wanted is to represent that the Internet of Information, had certain values behind it: openness, neutrality, and it transformed how we exchange information, how we access knowledge. The communication industry was disrupted. How we, share entertainment was disruptive. But one thing that was missing was the same layer or infrastructure to transfer value. And in our opinion, in my opinion, and RSK's and RIF opinion, what Bitcoin brought was the beginning or the foundations of a new internet for the transfer of value that shares with the Internet of Information the openness, the neutrality, and also I think the Internet analogy helps in many ways. One way is Internet by definition is a network of networks. It's not a single network to rule them all, but also it's a multi-layered system where you have each layer has a responsibility that is very well defined and it's designed to serve that purpose. And in that sense, Bitcoin was designed to be the store of value of this Internet of Value. Kind of the digital gold, the safest layer where you can rely that your value will be very well protected. But if you want to build the Internet of Value and you want to build a full financial system, you need more than that. I mean, it's like gold alone doesn't make a financial system. You have rules or rules of agreements between parties. You have to represent other assets, other valuables. And that's how, with RSK, what we did is extended Bitcoin to offer those other functionalities. And now with RIF, we are building the third layer that bridge the gap between these settlement layers and mass adoption.
So is it, I mean, just to use simple terms, if layer one is this transfer of value system that basically exists, is layer two what you might call a smart contract layer, i.e.
Yes.
making that transfer subject to new conditions that exist on the second layer?
Yes, that's why I call it like an agreement settlement layer, because what we are doing in smart contracts, it's actually about agreements or business logic that you settle in the same way as you settle transactions in Bitcoin. So you know that once those rules are put into the blockchain, they will be respected and fulfilled exactly as you expected. So you have kind of a legal system that is fully enforceable and has no subjectivity in it.
So, and I mean, some people here, but probably most of us will have heard of the concept of a smart contract. Most of us will have heard of other virtual machines, like Ethereum will be the most sort of obviously. What's the difference between the various different emerging protocols or layers that have that functionality? Why is everyone not using one or everyone not using another?
Well, if you use it, I mean, if you use this structure or this conceptual structure that I lay down, you can check each one of the networks and see that some of them have, compounded maybe two layers in one. In the case of Ethereum, Ether is the store of value of Ethereum, and they are putting in the same network the business logic system. In our case, what we did is we have that split. So Bitcoin is the store of value, RSK is the business logic. So different, on one side you have that. The early platforms were maybe focused only on store of value in some way. The newer platforms are integrating agreements or smart contracts. And the main difference is security, is the security model behind it. So, for example, there's one concept that is economical security that is describing how much money you need to put to disrupt the network. So in that sense, Bitcoin is the total leader. RSK is the second one in terms of security because 40% of the Bitcoin network is protecting Bitcoin and RSK, and Ethereum is around the third one with 25 to 30% of the economical security of Bitcoin. So that's one element you can have in mind. Like the other element is decentralization, is how people can, one key concept of Bitcoin is that you can independently validate the transactions of the network. You don't need to trust third parties. You can download the software, you can download the history of the transactions in the network and validate everything by yourself. And that's something that at RSK we are trying to protect very hard. And it's sorry to see that in Ethereum, for certain problems they had, that's not possible anymore. Running like a full node of Ethereum is not something that regular people can do. You need like specialized hardware, but that can, I mean, all these systems are alive. They will evolve. Ethereum will solve their problems. Like we are all this is a working process in that sense. So
I mean, again, like imagine, or lots of people talk, or let's say RSK as a second layer construct on the Bitcoin protocol. Lots of other, there are some banks and other institutions here. People might have heard about whatever, the JP Morgan initiative or the Facebook initiative and all of that stuff. They are approaching this slightly differently. They're not building on these open, decentralized platforms or layers. They are constructing their own, call it private chains or networks. What's the difference?
Well, going back to the analogy, back in the day when the internet started, everybody was saying, no, internet is not so interesting. Extranets or intranets are going to be the future, you know. And now we know it's true. Intranets are the future. So, so in that sense, it's like, if you want to really disrupt, I mean, if you think about how the financial system works today, it's the combination of private networks for the transfer of value. Forget about blockchain. I mean, conceptually, it's like I was trusting the guardian of a private network, and all the participants within that network were relying on that central authority that was making deals with another central authority from another private network, and in that way they were building the global financial system that we have today, no? First attempts of doing that were maybe Marco Polo. We were giving him our gold in Venice, and he was giving us a check that we could cash out in Beijing. So conceptually, it's a more evolved system, but the basics are the same. So when you do a private blockchain system like the ones you are mentioning, you're still relying on that central authority, whether it's Facebook, Google, or a combination, a consortium. You are still playing with the old rules where you need to ask permission to participate. And that's why I started like saying what we are trying to build here is an internet of value that shares the openness, the neutrality of the internet of information. And that's what's disruptive against the system that has been running the financial system of the world for the last 300 years.
And will it, I mean, making a prediction going forward, I'll ask you another maybe slightly more relevant question, definitely a question that comes up a lot for me, that some people say, lots of people talk about blockchain today. Everyone is talking about it. It's the future of everything, every potential industry. A lot of the bigger institutions also say, okay, no, we like the technology. We don't like Bitcoin. We don't like cryptocurrency.
And they are right. They are smart because the technology is not so dangerous for them as the whole ecosystem is.
But is there? I mean, do you see? I mean, I read this Forbes 50 blockchain list the other day. The biggest 50 companies in the US are adopting blockchain-related solutions. The reality is that I think 24 of them were building their solutions on Ethereum, 22 on Hyperledger, all the way down to Bitcoin. On sort of 10 of them were using Bitcoin. Is it the reality that something like RSK or some network or protocol that also is very heavily linked to the concept of cryptocurrency will be the platform or solution or the language, the TCP/IP of the future that becomes the language for every blockchain solution? Or is that a fallacy and it'll be some new and wonderful system or line by line private chains that develop their own adoption of blockchain?
One thing is that when we talk about blockchain, people is putting, I always say that blockchain is a solution, but the problem is what's the problem is the question. No, it's like we know that blockchain is a solution, but which problem are we solving? And blockchain by itself is like talking about the combustion engine. It's like you cannot have a car only with a combustion engine. So blockchain is only a data structure. As I said, the important thing that Bitcoin did is like it created a system that could protect this blockchain, this registry, in a decentralized way without a central entity, and that created an incentive model based on game theory that would make people be willing to sustain that system without, just because they earn money by doing so. So it's a fully decentralized economic system. I like to call them a crypto economy. When you are talking about private blockchains, they are okay again, but the incentives of the guardians of those blockchains are aligned with their own interest, not with the interest of the network. So Private blockchains will exist. They are part, like we have intranets today and we have extranets, and some of them are connected through the internet. So that's how the world works, is diverse. The world is not one system to rule them all. But if you want to choose the best store of value, you will choose Bitcoin, because it's the more censorship resistance, the more secure blockchain. Is limited in functionality, and that's on purpose, because the objective of Bitcoin is to become the gold standard of the world, to become the digital gold of the world. If you want more flexibility, but you want to have censorship resistance and have smart contracts, very likely you will choose RSK. If you want just the flexibility of smart contracts and have a little bit more of trust within the premises of the company, maybe you will do a private blockchain and interconnect it to, private blockchain and interconnect it to a public blockchain. So there's no one system to rule them all.
There won't be one language. There won't be one.
Well, language is another thing, because in that sense, we are building certain protocols that are standardized. For example, Ethereum programming language is Solidity. RSK programming language is Solidity. So we are fully compatible. You can move applications from one blockchain to the other seamlessly. We are creating trustless two-way pegs, trustless bridges to transfer value from one blockchain to the other with the same security of the blockchains interconnected. So we are creating that lingua franca between these networks of value.
And is that happening across all of these many protocols that are developing? Will the future question be about the interoperability of these languages with each other? Is that? I mean, the reason I'm asking that question is that everyone is talking about this, but what is stopping? What is stopping
mass adoption?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is the?
Well, I think the mass adoption has two answers, in my opinion. It's like, first, we were trying to use blockchain for everything, like what we were saying, no? Tagging rhinoceros in Africa with blockchain. I don't know why, but so first it was like blockchain for everything. Then we realized that blockchain is mostly a validation tool and a settlement tool. So you only want to put things that are critical on the blockchain. You don't want to put your baby's pictures on the blockchain, because that's not the purpose of blockchain. So now we understand what's the purpose of blockchain. And now we were facing one of the problems of blockchain is that blockchain is very secure, but it's not very scalable. Like Bitcoin can process 10 transactions per second, Ethereum maybe 25, 30 transactions per second, RSK 100 transactions per second. But if you compare that with traditional financial systems, PayPal is doing 190 transactions per second today. And if you go to Alibaba in the peak and the holidays, you are talking about 85,000 transactions per second. So blockchain is not enough to serve the needs of the world in terms of transactional volume. So that's why one of the problems was scalability, and we are working on that. That's the layer 3 we are doing on top of RSK. RIF is doing that, is creating a peer-to-peer payment processing system that uses the blockchain as a fail-safe system. So most of the transactions are executed peer-to-peer, but if somebody tries to cheat, you can always resort to the blockchain, to the smart contracts, to enforce the transaction. So in that way, you have a very efficient system where as long as you behave, transactions are almost zero cost, they are instant, and you can trust them.
So what stops them? And if that's working, and the Lumino...
But it's very recent.
Right.
That's the thing, is that's one problem, scalability.
Right.
Lightning on Bitcoin was the first one to do it. Lumino is the second one. Raiden on Ethereum is coming. So that's just happening now. But that's not the only problem. And sorry, I interrupted. But I think the other big problem is adoption needs developers that can use, developers are the ones building the applications for the end users. And building smart contracts is very complex and very sensitive. If you program a smart contract wrong, then you lose money. And that happened in many occasions. Like a lot of money was lost already, because programming smart contracts is more like avionics than it is as a web page, as building a web page. It's not the same concept. So what we need is an abstraction layer where programmers can program based on business needs and not, on the low-level programming. And that's being built as well in many of the crypto economies, but that's not ready yet. And what we need to do is bring these technologies to traditional developers. If you have a game developer that already has a community of 500 users, 500,000 users, let's give them the tools so they can integrate decentralized infrastructure in their game instead of asking from him to become a crypto expert or a blockchain expert. And I think when we have that, and that's I think what we are doing here in the university goes in that direction, is how we take these tools and make them easy to use for people who is trying to solve real problems so they can use this technology on a high level, not on the low level. Everybody was reinventing the wheel in the last 2 years, 3 years. Like every project is building a wallet from scratch. Every project is building an escrow contract from scratch. We need to stop that. We need to start having the building blocks and give those building blocks to developers. So.
But even when those building blocks exist, will that lead to a mass adoption? We probably all use WhatsApp. None of us have any idea of the underlying, technology or language that allows messages to be. Blockchain seems to be much more more restrictive to certain groups of people who do still understand it. What will change the world in allowing people to make that step?
Well, I think WhatsApp was made by developers. There's only like 5,000 blockchain developers in the world. If you go, for example, the top engine in Asia for games has 1.2 million developers. Those developers are all the time thinking how to build a new game, how to bring new functionalities to their users. So that's one step. It's like, of course, end users are the final goal, but in order to do that, first you have to give traditional developers tools to build, to experiment with this. And also the other thing that is key is bringing these tools to traditional organizations, governments, corporations, because they have the users. But there was a breach, there was a gap, a huge gap between the technology and the organizations willing to use or that might profit from using this technology. So I think mass adoption is coming when we can marry those two things, like organizations that already have the user base and have real problems to be solved or processes to be improved. And when we simplify the use of these technologies for those organizations, then mass adoption will come.
And are those, you talk about the problems that might exist that can be solved. And everyone has talked about the technology being able to be used in lots of different ways. The reality is that almost a large percentage of the money that's being invested in the technology today is to do with payments, remittances, transfers. Where else do you really see that it will be required or adopted at the front end? You talked a bit, we spoke in the last few days about ID verification systems and things like that.
Yes.
Is that where you see the natural next step, or where do you see it?
Well, when I see at the space, I split it like in two main use cases or main areas. One is the monetary part that you're mentioning, that goes from representing stable assets, the local currencies, any commodity, anything of value in the world, creating a digital twin of those valuable assets in the world, and then you can apply logic to that or transact. And on the transaction side, this is disruptive per se, because what we are changing is custodial services will change, because now the people will have the choice of being their own custodial or rely on third parties, but they are not obliged to do so. And also transactional cost will be fixed, will be, if you go to the highest security layer, you will pay 25 cents USD like you do in Bitcoin. If you go to the second layer, you will pay a couple cents. If you go to the third layer, you will pay a fraction of a cent. So suddenly you can transfer any amount of money, and depending on the security level you choose, you will have a fixed cost. And if you think about that, that's revolutionary. It's like what Skype did for communications. I can talk to anybody in the world. I can talk to somebody in Siberia at zero cost now. That was impossible 25 years ago. Well, with this, we have the same ability. We will be able to send money. We are able to send money today anywhere in the world at a fixed cost. So that's already happening. But the other side is the social, what I call it the social scaling, is now we can have social contracts that can be enforced on a mass scale. So we can have social contracts that are proven, that are hardened over time, that we can rely on. So on the social side, we can scale our societies. We can create societies that are more transparent, that are more reliable, and more efficient. So all the value that is being lost in the inefficiencies on the engagement between people, and now I will connect with what you were mentioning, can be reduced to a point where it will be very, very efficient to engage between peoples to do projects. And I always mention the nature of the firm from Koibanx. That is a paper from 1940 that explores why the firms make sense, why they add value. And basically it's because the cost of engagement is so high that you want to set up like an engagement arrangement that will last for longer periods of time. But if you have something that for me is the most important emerging pattern of the Internet of Value, that is reputational-based identities, now you will be able to engage with people you don't know very fast. A simple way to understand is how Uber was able to build the best, transportation company in the world, basically creating reputation profiles. So those reputation profiles, every time somebody puts a star on you, or numbers of stars on you, they're enabling that your next trip doesn't need like a lot of pre-agreements. You can just trust that rating system to engage with people you don't know. The problem is those systems are keeping the reputation for themselves. With these technologies, what we can do is transfer that reputational information into the individuals so they can now be owners of their own reputational information.
So your Airbnb rating or your Uber rating is transferable to your whatever purchase rating, to your Amazon rating.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a super interesting concept. But let me ask you a slightly more difficult question, which is what stops the current technology from allowing people to do that? So I think in China, there are actually, rating systems attached to WeChat accounts where, depending on how quickly you pay a fine using that application, it ups your status within the community. That exists pre-blockchain. Why do we need this, or what makes it better?
Well, because that rating is in the hands of WeChat or Alipay. It's not in the hands of individuals. So now the value is concentrated in the organizations that are coordinating these community economies or collaborative economies. And what we are saying is that we can untap that power and give it back to the individuals. So suddenly I can, as I said, I can associate with somebody in China that I don't know previously, and we can do business together because we have like ratings that we can share. So that's, imagine all the value being collected or kept in the Facebooks, in the Airbnbs, in the Ubers, in the WeChats or WePays, being distributed among the people. So that gives, it's a huge opportunity to have a society with more opportunities, with more prosperity for everybody. So that's what's revolutionary. It's not that the ratings are already there, but are in the hands of a few. And the other problem, now that you mentioned China, is that, reputation in the hands of big organizations can be used both ways. It can be used to monitor, to do mass surveillance of the society. And in that sense, I think that's a fight we are not fighting yet because we don't understand the consequences of it. But digitizing the economy, eradicating cash as we know it, can go both ways. Of course, there are good sides, like you avoid tax evasion. But on the other side, it can, in the wrong hands, and you never know where that technology will end in the future. In the wrong hands, that can be a mass surveillance system. So, I think crypto is in between. Has the right balance, where you can have the qualities of cash, but if there's a crime, you can actually do forensics and analyze it. So I think that's a balance that is very important, and we don't realize it. We have given away our privacy and a lot of things, for the sake of getting into this brave new world.
Let me ask you one or a couple of simple questions relevant to today. It's a startup grind event. So why would a startup today, you mentioned there are 5,000 blockchain developers in the world. I mean, they're known to be very expensive. It's a very expensive. What attracts not only like the startup community to adoption of this technology, but also, I'll call it another bigger startup community, Gibraltar, a jurisdiction. What's the attraction, or what do you see the obvious reason for a place like this to be a front runner in doing what we're trying to do?
Well, I think we are building the financial system of the future. So this is how the financial system in the future will work, because we are transforming, as I said, we are touching like two of the three core elements in the financial system. One is custody of assets. The other one is payment processing. Now, it doesn't make sense to pay a percentage of the transaction and have an unwilling partner that is a payment processor. So definitely the fintechs of the future will build on top of this infrastructure. So for the fintechs, also this open system offers the possibility of competing without asking permission to the people you are trying to disrupt. So far for fintechs, it has been very tough, because it's like they build something new, something very valuable, but then they have to go to the traditional financial system and ask for permission to say, can I play with you? And they have the ball, so it's very tough. They say, okay, you can play, but then you have to join my team. No? So I think in that sense, this will create competition in a level, in the financial sector for sure, in a level that we never saw. And of course, there's another thing that for me is very important, that is the purpose of our organization, that is financial inclusion. These reputational profiles are also the key to provide services, financial services, to those excluded in our society. So that's another sector where I think there's a lot to be done, because people is excluded from our society for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is that if you don't have anything of value to put as collateral, if you don't have a house, a car, or a formal paycheck, basically there's no scoring systems to measure the risk that you carry with you. So that's why the traditional financial services are not being able to reach that part of the population. But if we create reputational profiles, if they create reputational profiles in their interactions, suddenly they have something of value. But because building a reputation takes time, takes effort, takes conduct, and that's something that every human being has. Yeah? No matter how poor or rich you were born, you have your reputation. So now what we are doing is taking that reputation, making it visible, and turning it into a valuable asset, so those who are excluded in our society can access financial services. So I think there are many disruptions are coming. As I said, open reputational systems, financial inclusion. So I think this is a technology that really is going to drive the transformation of our society in the years to come.
So of all those exciting things moving forward, what would you identify as the biggest risks? Is it regulation? Is it government authorities clamping down? Is it large JP Morgans or Facebooks making their own private systems that effectively replicate everything that you're proposing to do within private initiatives and single companies?
Yes.
What do you think? I mean,
if you asked me like 6 years ago, the threats were much bigger than now. I think the threats are being less and less, but of course these like washing out of the real value of the technology, saying, okay, blockchain is the thing and not the open networks, which is actually the revolutionary thing, is a way of like, diminishing the value of this phenomenon. So that can be a threat, but they have been trying for many years and it's not really like settling yet. What you say is that capturing the value of these without opening the game really could be one threat. On the regulatory side, I think there's always a conversation between disruptive technologies and regulators. So I don't see that as a problem. We were discussing this. I mean, Skype was, for 10 years had no regulatory framework. It was disrupting the international telecommunications industry like deeply. And if technologies provide value for society, regulators will adapt because the regulators are in the service of society, not the other way around. So it's a matter of proving that we can provide value for the society. So I should focus on that, on creating applications that actually improve the life of people, because that's the best way to explain technology. That's the best way to have the regulators on your side. So that I don't see as a problem. Of course, there will be some tension because there's people who use disruptive technologies also for bad, no? As I always like to say, technologies are, agnostic. We are the ones that have to give a direction to the technology. We have to put technology to the service of society.
The earliest adopters of every technology are almost always the bad guys in reality.
Yeah.
So on the risks, and maybe just to finish off, what do you see as the biggest opportunities? What do you see in the perfect outcome in 10 years' time? What do you see that being?
Well, I think we were describing this during the chat, but it's basically having a financial system that is inclusive by nature, because I don't think we need to create a financial system for the poor. What we need to build is a financial system that is so efficient and adapted to every human being that by nature will be inclusive. So that's one thing I would love to see happening. The other thing, as I said, is empowering individuals by giving them the control of their reputations back so they can, engage and collaborate and build value together more freely. Because I think one of the problems of our society is the concentration of power, but concentration of power will always happen, but when the relationships of power are frozen, cannot be changed, then is when abuse appears. So having power that is dynamically changing, also liquid power will also improve the society, will create a more fair society. So I think that's good enough.
That's good enough. Look, just to finish off the year, obviously it's a real pleasure to have you with us today, but also to be helping and participating so much in what we're trying to do and helping us move that forward. So thank you, and I think thank everyone, and that's everything from me.
Thank you very much.
So just to finish off, does anybody have any questions for Diego? No. I'm going to ask you a question. What are your future plans in Gibraltar?
Well, we want to...
As much as you can tell us.
Yes, we want to walk the talk, no? So we have been talking about the potential of these technologies, and as Albert said, when we started talking, we say, okay, let's work on education, we discuss other ideas, and we are making these ideas happen. So, our dream would be to use these technologies for the service of Gibraltar as a whole in the society, to showcase the world that this technology can actually improve society and bring value. So we of course, the permission of the government, and we want to go all the way and help, make this a beacon, make Gibraltar a beacon for the world of how these technologies can improve society. So everything from...
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So the pillars of our organization that we represent with these events are to educate, inspire, and connect, and I think you certainly did that very well today. I also have to say thank you to Joey Garcia for lifting a huge weight off my shoulders and doing this interview as a real expert. And obviously, thank you to our sponsors, to the team, to all of you, and I hope you enjoy a networking and a few drinks and some nibbles. Thank you very much.